and welcome to Sick Myth. I hope you will find today's topic to be informative and fascinating. Let's begin. The year is 1778. 2 years earlier, in Philadelphia, the Continental Congress voted to declare American independence from the Kingdom of Great Britain. The American Revolutionary War had been waging on for over 3 years, since the battles of Lexington and Concord in April of 1775. As the war continued on, the British recruited Loyalists and indigenous allies to conduct a frontier war along the northern and western borders of the 13 colonies, often catching Patriot militia forces off guard in raids and surprise attacks against frontier settlements. The Wyoming Valley is a historic, industrialized region of northeastern Pennsylvania. The valley is a crescent-shaped depression, a part of the Ridge and Valley or Folded Appalachians. The Susquehanna River occupies the southern part of the valley, which is notable for its deposits of anthracite coal, a topic which we will explore in future videos. As one of the original 13 colonies, Pennsylvania played a central position in the American Revolution and in the founding of the United States, serving as a hub for political and intellectual activity during the Revolutionary era. The state was home to influential figures such as Benjamin Franklin and James Wilson, who shaped the country's early political and legal institutions. In addition, Philadelphia served as the temporary capital of the United States while Washington, D.C. was under construction. In the spring of 1778, Loyalist volunteers and hundreds of indigenous warriors within the Iroquois Six Nations were raiding settlements along the Allegheny River in western Pennsylvania and New York State. Raids were also conducted along the west branch of the Susquehanna River in northeastern Pennsylvania. In early June, Loyalist commander John Butler and his allies, including Mohawk war leader Joseph Brant, aka Monster Brant, were planning a major attack on the Wyoming Valley, specifically various forts scattered throughout northeastern Pennsylvania, including Fort Wyoming and Fort Pittston. On July 3rd, at 2 p.m., some 375 men marched out of 40 Fort. They marched up what is now Wyoming Avenue, stopping at a bridge which crossed Abraham's Creek. After 4 o'clock p.m., they marched on toward Exeter Flats and defeat. There were only 174, including Zebulon Butler and Nathan Dennison, who escaped with their lives. Almost all who were captured were cruelly tortured and killed by the Indians. Every movement by the Americans was observed by indigenous scouts. Major Butler positioned his forces in an open field, with the Rangers on the left and his indigenous allies on the right. He ordered his men to lie on the ground and wait for the order to fire. The Americans deployed into a line of battle as they approached the field, unaware that they were being flanked by the Seneca and Cayuga. The Seneca and Cayuga broke cover and attacked the Americans with maul, tomahawk, and spear. The battle lasted about 30 minutes. An attempt to reform the American line quickly turned into a frantic rout, as the inexperienced militiamen panicked and ran. It became a deadly race from which only about 60 escaped, including Lieutenant Colonel Butler and Colonel Dennison. Many of those overtaken by the Seneca and Cayuga were killed and scalped immediately. However, some were taken captive and were later tortured and executed. In the aftermath of the massacre, Lieutenant Colonel Butler and the surviving Continental soldiers left the Wyoming Valley on the morning of July 4th, rather than being taken as prisoners of war. That afternoon, Colonel Dennison surrendered Forty Fort, along with what remained of the militia. None of the valley's inhabitants were killed after the capitulation, but many did have their personal effects plundered by Butler's indigenous allies. In the days that followed, houses and barns throughout the Wyoming Valley were looted and burned. Mills were destroyed, and livestock was driven off. The Battle of Wyoming remained well known to most Americans for the rest of the 18th century and for most of the 19th. It particularly reemerged in national discourse during the War of 1812, when Americans again found themselves fighting the British and their indigenous allies on the frontier. The western state of Wyoming is named after the Wyoming Valley. The state received its name from the United States Congress when the Wyoming Territory was created in 1868. Construction of a monument to commemorate the battle began in 1833 and was completed a decade later. The 63-foot-tall obelisk is the site of a common grave containing the remains of many of the victims of the battle. The names of 176 of the slain are inscribed on the monument. The Battle of Wyoming has always been a fascinating component of our local history. There's a lot of information available online and in libraries across the nation, so I do encourage you to do your own follow-up research. Thank you for your time. Please like and subscribe. Until next time, thank you for watching.